in each cattle wagon, men, women, children, old people, young people, all squeezed together. And it was impossible in this cattle wagon, in these 100 people, to be comfortably to sitting on the floor. And somehow or other we survived this journey.
Beginning in January 1933, the Nazi regime came to power in Germany. Led by Adolf Hitler, the system of government began targeting millions of Jews, disabled citizens, and homosexuals all throughout Europe, as Nazi Germans believed they were racially superior to these groups. The regime forced these innocent citizens into confined ghettos and further transported them to concentration camps where they were physically and mentally abused, starved, dehumanized, and murdered. Ultimately known as the Final Solution, approximately 6 million Jews and 5 million others were killed by German armed forces over the 12-year span in which the Nazi regime had ruled the majority of Europe. Edward Linenthal once said, as Raoul Hilber once reminded me, one of the rules of Holocaust speech was that any survivor, no matter how inarticulate, is superior to the greatest Holocaust historian who did not share in the experience. I was given the opportunity to speak with a Holocaust survivor and listen to his story firsthand. His experience is just one of thousands of testimonies that have inspired me to remember the time period by further sharing what I have learned with others.
Unlike most of us who went on deportation, my family decided to go into hiding. From the community that I'm from, Delft, a small Dutch town outside of The Hague, 100 Jewish families lived there before the war. We were the only one that survived intact as a family after the war. Everybody else had been killed. My parents decided to split up the whole family. We all went into different places. My mother found different addresses for us to go, and so that if one of us was caught, the others would still survive. My father and mother decided to stay together because they didn't want to be separated from each other. And my mother was caught on a train in 1944 and wound up first in a prison in Amsterdam, and then was sent to a Dutch concentration camp, a place called Westerbork, and then she was sent to Bergen-Belsen, outside of Hamburg. There she briefly met Anne Frank, who was in the same barrack as she among Dutch children. She was 16, I think, at that time. And my mother met her briefly before she died, with her sister Margot. But my mother miraculously survived, and that itself is a complicated story. She was very, very sick and lost a tremendous amount of weight, very bad shape, but she came through. And after the war, when we were reunited in 1945, we also survived. We were liberated by the Canadian Army in April 1945.
How old were you at that time?
I was, 1945, I was 11. And my parents decided immediately to leave Holland and to go to America. My mother had a sister in Massachusetts who had lived there from the 1920s on, and that probably made it a lot easier for us to come to America. So we all came to America and lived happily ever after. My parents lived to be in their 80s, and the three boys, as they were called, are all married and have children and grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren of my own. And I've always considered life a complete gift after that. the reason I became a philosopher is because I kept asking the most fundamental questions. What happened? How could this have happened? Why, of course, no, but how? And particularly the question of where was God in the Holocaust? The silence of God, the questions that Elie Wiesel asks in Night, which is a book that I taught for many, many years. Those are the fundamental philosophical questions, and I thought philosophy I could answer them. First of all, there are museums.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you went to the museum here in Skokie. There's the Holocaust Museum in Washington, Yad Vashem, Israel. The commemorative days, Yom HaShoah. Those are important. Will it be forgotten? No, probably not. It will be normalized, because everything in human history gets normalized. That once it's been done, it can be done again. And it set a certain level of genocide. But I think this one was unique, because, and for that reason I don't think it was like any other mass murder, because this one was very specific, had a whole theory to support it. I had been teaching a course in the Holocaust here for about 7 or 8 years, and then one day I was giving some sort of lecture, and I had made some posters, and I went to the local jewel store in town and was putting up these posters, and one of the bagger boys came up and said, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, it's a poster. It's on the Holocaust." He said, "Oh, Holocaust, that's a good show. I watched that on television." Good show. It was a good show.
Do you believe, though, that the movies and the museums are a good representation of kind of what happened, and it instills a sense of memory within our generation?
No, not really. No, I don't think so. Documentaries, yes. Fictional films, no. And fictional books, no. You know, the boy in the pajamas and all that stuff. There's a certain way in which that form of terror and horror really cannot be put on the screen faithfully. I don't believe it can be. And doesn't have to be. But the pointlessness of 6 million, 1.5 million children, Jesus, it is just terrifying.
I spoke with a few of my classmates regarding their opinions of remembering the Holocaust after studying the time period throughout the entire semester. Their opinions seemed to reflect those of the survivors who wished to instill a sense of memory of the time period as well.
Yeah, this class has really helped me with the Holocaust studies in general. Is really cool because like you get to get really specific individual stories that you probably wouldn't get from just basic facts. So when you study the memory of a Holocaust, you actually learn about what's important to memorialize instead of just what is being memorialized. And deciding those things is really important because we're trying to help future generations learn about these kinds of things, and deciding what's important will help them remember in a better way than maybe we can.
My experience in our senior seminar class has been really positive and eye-opening. I've always been interested in learning about like the Holocaust in general, but really think much about it before this class. I really appreciated it because it's something that I'm going to hold on to for a really long time. Like, it's not something that I would just study for a test and then forget about after I've taken it. So I think that my knowledge is definitely going to stick with me in the future. And I think that's important because remembering the Holocaust is important because it's one of the biggest atrocities that's ever happened in our time. And, like, even though we can't experience and never know everything about it, I think it's important to, like, acknowledge and recognize it because it was just such a big part of our world's history, and so many lives were, like, brutally taken and lost, and that's, like, should not go unsaid and not talked about today, and that's just not, it's not right.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna to continue to thoughtfully reflect on the Holocaust after this class. I'm not gonna sell my books back for sure. I definitely might. I'm probably gonna read them again. They were really interesting. And to bear witness to these kinds of things is really important. Not just to do it once, but maybe in a few years I might have a different take on it. And I want to continue to do this throughout my life. So.
Just knowing how much I've learned from this class makes me, like, want to share with other people, like, my knowledge and what happened during the Holocaust, because I think that everyone should have, like, a good grasp of the history of it because it was so important. So it's really made me want to talk about it with other people and make sure they have the right information and know what actually happened in general.
This class has taught me a lot about the Holocaust. We've read a lot of cool articles and seen a lot of movies on the Holocaust, and I definitely think that I'll remember this class and everything that I've learned. And I can definitely see myself spreading my knowledge with other people that aren't fortunate enough to be able to take a whole class on the Holocaust.
Throughout this class, we've been lucky enough to read memoirs, diaries. We've watched numerous movies on the Holocaust and documentaries. I've been able to see 2 Holocaust survivors speak and tell their stories. I've also been able to visit a museum and a memorial, and I really have gained a good amount of knowledge on what the horrific events that occurred. And it's instilled something in me that I will never forget. I will remember the Holocaust forever, and now I feel obligated to go out there and, share what I've learned with my friends and my family in order to instill a sense of remembrance within them as well. And I think that that's something that we all must do in order to make sure the Holocaust is remembered for the rest of our lives and the future generations.